Hey everyone, it's Ashley and I'm back with a video today to teach you how you can make a custom oversized decal, and this is using iron-on vinyl. I'm going to show you how you can take a inexpensive tree skirt from someplace like Dollar General and turn it into something that has the same look of something much more expensive. So it's a great way to save money and it's an awesome skill to have that you can use for other projects later. If you haven't yet, make sure to subscribe, hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on any future content, and let's get started. Let's talk about what tools and supplies you'll need for this project. I'm going to be using the Cricut Maker, but you can also use the Cricut Explore Air too. You could use the Joy on this if you size down the project a bit. I'm also going to be using a Cricut standard grip mat in the larger size. This is the 12 by 24 inch mat. I'm going to use part of a roll of iron-on vinyl, a Cricut Easy Press mat to do the iron-on project with, also a Cricut iron-on protective sheet, or you could use butcher paper or parchment paper, a Dollar General tree skirt. This was $5. It's actually pretty large and it has a really nice classic look. You'll also want some type of weeding tool. I'm going to use one of the interchangeable weeding pens from Cricut and a pair of scissors. And you want an easy press machine or an iron to work with. I definitely would recommend using some heat tape as well, just to keep your design in place while you're working with it. Hey guys, we're inside Cricut Design Space and I'm trying to replicate this cool design that I saw on a Target tree skirt and make something that has kind of a similar vibe to it using inexpensive materials. So I'm going to go into the image library here where it says images, and I'm searching for the word Mary. There's a ton of really cute ones that I could totally use that have that same kind of style, but I really fell in love with the simplicity of this one here. So I'm going to select that one and click Insert Images. I'm going to make this really oversized, okay? So normally you want to make it about the size of your iron, but I'm going to overlap it and I'm going to do one section and then do the other section so I can get a really oversized design for this one. So I'm going to drag and click the corners. And when you're working with a project that's pretty large, you can go to the bottom left corner of your screen and adjust the sizing down. If you're using mobile, you can pinch it with your fingers as well on your screen. Okay, I think I'm going to make this pretty large. This is going to be almost 19.5 inches by almost 9 inches, so it's 8.75. And the reason that I'm choosing it this way is I have a 12 by 10 iron, and so if I place the 12 by 10 iron so that I'm doing half of the design at a time here, I can do one half here and have this be the 12-inch part of the iron and have this be the 10-inch part of the iron. So I'll do one section ironed here and then the other section ironed here. So it makes sense in my head. I will show you guys how this one looks. I'm going to be switching to using the Maker for this one. You can definitely use the Explore Air too. For the Joy, this one would be really complicated to cut out because of the larger size on this one. So I'm going to click on Make It. It's telling us, hey, this is pretty large. We're going to have to use a larger mat. So I'm going to click OK on that. Because I'm going to be working on this with iron-on vinyl, I need to mirror this. So what I'm going to do is select Mirror. And now what I can do is I'll have to get my mat ready and put the materials on there. Make sure that I have plenty of material to cover for the whole section so that there's plenty of room. Make sure to set your base material to iron-on vinyl. So everyday iron-on for this one. We'll make sure that the mirror is turned on and that the material is shiny side down. So you can just check to make sure your mirror is turned on the bottom here, and it says mirror is on. So we're ready to go. Let's add our material to our mat here. And I'm using the extended size mat on this because I'm making a pretty large project. We're using the standard grip mat because it's the best for working with vinyl specifically. I have my roll of iron-on. This is the everyday iron-on. There are two sides to this. So there's a matte side and a shiny side. The shiny side is going to go face down on the mat, and let's go ahead and unroll this and attach it here. When you're unrolling such a large amount, you're going to want to make sure that you start in one section and lay that down first before you work on the rest. That way you get the same result across it and not a ton of air bubbles. Also, when you're working with iron-on, you definitely want to make sure you remove any bubbles and try to make sure your hands are nice and clean, or you can use a brayer like I'm using here just to make it adhere a little bit nicer. We have our mat loaded here, and the material's already preset. We're using the fine point blade, which is a standard blade. This is a huge mat, so you're going to have to hold the other end while you're loading this one in. And then we'll press the start button to start cutting. Okay, so this one is ready to unload. Let's unload it. We finished cutting our decal. You can weed this on the mat if you find it easier to weed like that. Personally, I tend to weed off of the mat more often than on. So I'm going to flip this one over, and I'm going to remove this from the mat by holding down our project and then just rolling the mat backwards off of it. I'm holding this up to the light so I can see exactly where our decal is. I'm going to cut away the excess pieces that we're not using for this. That way I don't waste as much of the iron-on. Since this is rolling around, I think I will attach this back to my mat. So I'm just going to place this back on the mat and just use this to hold it in place while I'm working. Let's take our weeding tool and we're going to pick a corner here. And what we're going to do is use the weeding tool to lift up from the corner. And then we can use it to weed away the excess. Weeding is just when you're removing the extra vinyl from your design. If you want to save as much of this vinyl as possible, when you're cutting, you can always make sure to cut around as close as possible to it. I like to leave a little bit of the extra if I can around it, just to make sure that I have something to help keep this in place while I'm working. Because having the little plastic sheeting on the back around it is helpful when you're applying it. So I have a bunch of pieces here. I'm going to remove this by cutting that right there, so it's out of the way. And now I can focus on just weeding these parts here. When you're weeding the center portions, like right here, there's a center portion, you can just follow along the design and go right under the corners, and it'll help you to work with it. So you can also use the light as a source. You can just go right underneath. You should just be able to see the outline in the light. Now we have our design weeded. Let's make sure we remove any extra vinyl from our work surface. I'm going to take this off the mat by flipping this over. I had an error in my project here. What happened was when I lifted off the mat, it tore this section off here. Luckily, the iron-on stayed intact to where it belongs. So I'm just going to tape with the heat tape in this section that's separated so it keeps those pieces in place, and then when I use the iron-on, it should still adhere and be fine. That way I don't lose that. And just make sure that when you place this back down that everything is lined up and looks as good as possible. So that should still work and look great. We're in the Cricut Heat Guide. You'll find the link to this in the description box. It's definitely vital to check out the Cricut Heat Guide before you start working on your project, just so you can make sure that you have the settings correct for this. I'm using the Cricut Easy Press 2. We're going to select our heat transfer material as Everyday Iron-On. And our base material is going to be set to burlap. This is the same material as the stockings that I made, so I'm setting this also to burlap. I had a really great result with those, so I want to continue and use the same settings. And we're choosing the Easy Press mat. It tells us that we're going to be working on this for preheating for 5 seconds. We'll heat at 305 degrees Fahrenheit for 30 seconds with firm pressure. We'll flip and press for 15 seconds, and then we'll allow it to have a cool peel. And these are the supplies, how to prepare, and how to apply. We need to set the time and temperature for our project. On the Cricut heat guide, it says to set it to 305 degrees Fahrenheit, and we're going to set it for 30 seconds. So I'm going to adjust the temperature. And 30 seconds. Let's let this heat up and get our project prepared. So here's our tree skirt. It's pretty large. This is the back of it. I'm going to open this up and place it so that we can center it exactly where we want. So we know that we're keeping it in this section here to keep it even. So before we start, just make sure you have your project centered where you want it on here. This is not even or flat, so I'm going to pre-press this anyway just to make sure that this is nice and flat before we start working with it. So I'll pre-press this while our Easy Press is heating up, and then we'll let this cool down before we start. I'm just taking a look at what this would look like before I get started with anything. I find it easier to mock up kind of how this is going to lay out in our project before I even start working on the project. That way you get the best results on this. So taking a look at this, I know that my mat is definitely not long enough to do this all in one go, as well as my Easy Press. There's no way my Easy Press would be large enough to do this whole design at once. So I'm going to have to split this in half. And what I'm going to do is measure out my project, and then I'm going to place a piece of tape along each section here of where the halfway point would be. So my decal's a little bit larger than 19 inches. So I'm going to make it about the 10.5 inch mark here. And what I'll do is at this 10.5 inch mark, I will take a piece of my tape and I will make sure to place it right along here. So I know exactly where this overlap point is going to start hitting. So right around here is going to be my overlap point for heating up. So I'm going to do this also along the bottom of my design. So right around here is the halfway point. So as you can see, I have 2 pieces of tape sticking out right around the center mark for this. I'm going to tape around the rest of the design on the edges, so that way I can make sure that the decal does not move, since I'm going to be moving it around consistently, and I'm going to be moving the iron around. I want to make sure everything stays in place where it belongs. Okay, so we finished adding tape to all the different sections here. We're not going to keep this on though. I just wanted to have this pre-prepared for when we're ready. So keeping in mind, we're only going to be applying 1/2 of this at a time because it is so oversized. It's bigger than my iron. So what I'm going to do is move this over. So this is the center point here, as you can see by the circle. We're going to move this over a bit, so it's closer to this end of the mat, and we have a little bit more extra space to work with. And what we're going to do is we need to preheat this section for 5 seconds at 305 degrees, and then we can apply our decal to this section. So let's go ahead and preheat it. So what you'll do is preheat both sides where you're going to place the decal for 5 seconds each, and then we're going to work on applying the heat in one section at a time. So this has been preheated. What I'm going to do is apply our decal with this center point right there in the middle. So let's make sure this is centered on. So we'll apply this down. We're going to apply it across both sides here, and we can adjust that as we're going. So When we're working with this is our cutoff point here where we're going to heat to this section. So let's make sure that we have our protective sheet right on here, and we can see through here where the edges are. So I'm going to place this over, and I'm actually going to move this so that this is over just a little bit so it protects the next layer just slightly. We're going to center this right over and press the time. We're using firm pressure since we're using a burlap background on this, and it's got a little bit more texture. Okay. Normally we would flip and press it. I'm going to move over to the next section and heat the next section too, and that way that this can be flipped over once that part's done. So same thing, we're going to keep this sheet over the midway mark just to make sure that we have a little bit of extra coverage, and we're going to go in and heat this side too. Our goal is to make sure that we have our plate a little bit away from that mid section there, just so it's not overlapping the section that we've already worked on. So we know right here where the edge is, it's already been worked on that direction. Okay. Let's remove our sheet. We are going to flip this over and we're going to press this for 15 seconds on both sections. So we're going to put this down and we're going to press this side for 15 seconds. If you're not sure where your decal is, just take a peek under there and you should be able to see it. And make sure you use a protection before that layer. We're not going to heat this the full amount. We're going to heat it to 15 seconds only. So once it hits 15 seconds, I'm going to remove this and then heat the other side. And let's move this over and we'll repeat this process on this section. Let's restart this on there. We'll heat it for 15 seconds on this side as well. Now we are going to flip this back over and we need to let this cool down. So we're going to leave this alone, let it cool down, and we'll come back and check it. Okay, this is cooled down completely. Now we can start removing it. We're going to start with a corner. And as always, if you're working with an iron-on project and you're finding that it's not removing completely or that it's still adhered, you can place this down and then give it another 15 seconds, which is half of the time that you would use normally on it. So if you have to reheat it, only reheat it for half the time. That is a big decal. I really love how that looks, so isn't that pretty? Now I have to go iron the rest of this so that it looks really nice. You can see the pleats are kind of wrinkled, so I'm going to iron this and then I'm going to place this under my tree and let's see how it turned out. If you enjoyed this video or if it helped you in any way, make sure to give it a thumbs up. That lets me know that you appreciate this content too. And if you haven't yet, make sure to subscribe, hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on any future videos, and I hope you're having a wonderful day.